How are you this morning?
I'm doing good. Yeah.
Good, good. All right. Um, so I'll just start. Hi, my name is Melani Douglas, and we are in another episode of Fresh Take. This one's going to be a little bit different because I'm usually doing the interviewing, but for Reclamation, I have invited George Ciscle to interview me related to the project and as a curator and an artist. And George will introduce himself, and then we can jump right into the question.
Great. Thank you, Melani. It's great to be invited to do this with the National Museum of Women in the Arts. I'm very excited and for the invitation today. So my name is George Ciscle, and Curator-in-Residence Emeritus from Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. And I guess in terms of my interest, certainly, in both education and in curatorial work, my questions really are going to revolve around those two areas. And I guess the first thing I wanted to ask Melani is, I know people are very familiar with the Project Reclamation, and that's coming up next month. But my question is this: when I started to look at the subtitle of the show, Recipes, Remedies, and Rituals, it really got me to thinking about what really was the inherent meaning of the word reclamation. I guess especially in terms of, it brings about our thinking about issues of renewal or reformation. And obviously in terms of the word remedies in your subtitle, that's sort of the social justice impact of the title. And I'm curious in terms of, especially during COVID times, in terms of what curating is right now, like, were you using this as an opportunity to explore like the meaning of curating in this time?
Well, as you know, Reclamation started, and it's just probably some backstory to provide for the audience as well. It started in 2015 when I had founded the Family Arts Museum, and I was at MICA. It was a part of my thesis work in the MFA in Curatorial Practice program that you started there. And my graduate school experience was bookended by two major social impacts. One was finding out the death of Trayvon Martin, finding out that his murderer would not be prosecuted, and then also the Freddie Gray uprising. That's my cat's tail, so that everyone knows that. The Freddie Gray uprising, and it was we're in a very different time where now people are talking more openly about social justice, but there was still a lot of push and pull about even talking about it. And I also was taking an Undoing Racism workshop, and what I found is that there was so much information about social injustice in the space of remedies, rituals, and recipes. So in that domestic space of the kitchen and the stories that we tell about our food and what happens to food once people are working to assimilate to a culture, or once people have been stripped of culture. And so a lot of times we will look at how racism dehumanizes Black people in particular, and then people of color. But it's not often that there's this very clear story about the dehumanization that racism and white supremacy and its impact on white people, its impact on everyone. But food does that. And so in the Undoing Racism workshop, there was an exercise where you talked about what you have left. And it was so interesting to see what people came up with, and how food and remedies, recipes, and culture was not really a part of what white people have brought up as what they have as a part of what their culture is. But yet when you look, if you're talking about someone about being Italian or Greek or then you get the story. So I saw this as an opportunity to like challenge a lot of things, like challenge where are we curating, who's curating, why do we curate, and then what is this collective forced curatorial experience about how we think about food, how we think about healing ourselves, healing our community, and then what are the opportunities to re-enter that space and reclaim the power in that space for everyone that has been negatively impacted by global imperialism and a delusional supremacy of that puts people at a hierarchy.
Well, it's interesting when you say that, because here you're centering this discussion and this exhibition around the kitchen table, a domestic space that we all are very familiar with, especially in terms of gathering our family and friends, especially in pre-COVID times when we were able to. And in your thesis exhibition that you're referring to at Micah in graduate school, that it was centered on another domestic space, which was a laundromat.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it seems like in both instances, both in your graduate work and now in your work in the museum field at the museum, that you're really starting to, I guess, sort of question what traditional museum exhibitions might be.
I'm questioning what they can be, where they can be, who gets to contribute to them, and then also reimagining, reimagining the collective experience of how we come to an exhibition. So, and there's a lot of work that's been done, in that space in socially engaged art. But for me, it's like, how do I anchor the art exhibition in spaces that are common to us all? Spaces that we all have at least some relationship with it, whether it's fraught or not. So the kitchen table, it may be a fraught relationship, but you have a relationship with it. You washing your clothes or having to cleanse yourself. You have, this is all accessible. And so how do you bring something inaccessible or something that's viewed as accessible, but and put it in places and anchor it in places that we all can relate to?
So in addition to this not being a traditional museum exhibition, just by the virtue that you conceived it as a virtual experience for us, right? What other ways do you see, either in the artists, the artworks that you've chosen, the format that you see, that this is not a traditional exhibition?
Well, I definitely moved away from having all fine artists, what we consider as a fine artist. So we have, 2 dancers, 2 performance artists, we have 2 chefs. And originally I wasn't going to include any chefs because I didn't want to try to make the space accessible and then make it inaccessible by having like professional chefs, come into the space. We have, 2 socially engaged artists. Everyone's coming from a very different background. And then also I'm asking them to step outside of what they would normally consider as their art. So everyone is put into the same framework of kind of 25 prompts to get them to take pictures or videos of, like, at the kitchen table, preparing your ingredients. And I'm asking them to focus on the art of their own self-care, the art of how they care for themselves and prepare their own food. So even these artists who do have a fine art, a lot of them have been in museums and galleries, I'm still saying, no, that's not the art I'm asking for. I'm asking you for the art that takes care of the artist, that makes the art possible. So what are you doing, or what's the recipe, or how are you preparing something? What are your rituals around the kitchen table that you can share? And then also, how do you view this space as your gallery? And also the kitchen table in whatever you're using as your medium and your canvas that you're working with. Make this your material.
I think that one of the things that struck me was looking at the 9 artists and their practices and what they're working on for reclamation, that the fact that all were interdisciplinary artists, that you, again, you, in the typical format of an exhibit, we be, of 9 artists, maybe 1 or 2 may have multiple practices, right? But the fact that none of them can be identified as a painter or a sculptor or strictly a socially engaged artist or a musician, right? Or as you say, a chef, that they all have these interlaps in terms of their own practices and their visions as they see themselves as artists. So for me, that was really the distinguishing factor of the 9 artists also. I guess one of the other things I wanted for you to talk about in terms of, I think, what the distinguishing factor is, that there's a participation aspect, that it's not just these 9 artists. And maybe you could talk about that as where does the whole issue of audience come in here?
So we're asking people to contribute their recipes, remedies, and food memories. And so because we thought when we say rituals, well, we're the act of cooking, or the act of going through recipes, we're already in the ritual space together. So we focused on the recipes, remedies, and also getting people to tell food memories. And we set up a website that has allowed people to contribute, and submit their stories. Amanda Vercruz, she's the public programs manager. She's worked very hard on the pantry and getting us ingredients, to also give us a little tidbit about where the ingredients come from. So people can tag the ingredients that they have and put them in the recipe. And then once you do that, it also, if you go back to like garlic, it'll bring all the recipes that come up related to garlic. And it'll also even pull the artist's work related to garlic. So we wanted, again, just making this something that's seemingly inaccessible, accessible. And then I guess I hadn't thought about it to this moment, making something that is actually accessible to everyone, elevating it to a space that to what we would consider a fine art space. So it's kind of a balancing act for both, and taking it from the everyday that we kind of just dismiss. Like you could walk past, we eat every day, but sometimes it can be, maybe for some people, it's not as mindful, we just kind of do it. And I think that art is that thing that makes us stop and say, well, wait a minute, what is that? What does this mean? And so by putting something that's accessible and everyday to us all in that space, it's also saying, well, wait a minute, let's stop. What does this mean? What are we saying? What are we doing? What are the choices that we're making? And taking that same amount of time to appreciate this everyday activity that has been crucial to the sustainability of humanity.
It's interesting, like you taking this work from the public that's been submitted, this content, and sort of interweaving it with the artist's work that are also giving us glimpses into their own homes, at the kitchen table, and the actual works in process. Our works in process sounds like that, sort of this collection that you're building.
Yeah.
That's evolving. I'm just curious if you've thought about how this might be, and for the museum, a different way of looking at what a collection is.
It's one of those questions that, of course, is coming, because when we're totally redefining what an archive now becomes, right? And so what is being registered, even as we're putting things in the digital space, how is the art being registered in our system? We use a system called Betty. How are we talking about it? How are we naming it? And I feel like I don't know what it is about that space of, all the unknowns, where I like projects that force you to ask questions that just maybe haven't been thought about. It's harder. It's definitely a lot more, I don't want to say frustrating, but it just requires a whole different part of my my brain and for our team to work differently, because we just don't know what's going to come up. But there's something very rich there that not only makes us ask, what is this, but also offers opportunities to rethink what we've called everything else. And I think that's important too.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, this opportunity, as you say, like for this, you know, much deeper engagement with the museum community, you know, and to expand the accessibility, that what you're doing, which of course is an interest to me, and we've talked about many times in your studies, that you know, what is the pushing the boundaries of museum practices.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing to take an exhibition, and as you're doing very innovative and creative things with it, especially during these times, in terms of making more accessible to large audiences. But when you're sort of questioning what the boundaries of a museum practice are, I think, to me, that's really what I would hope that sort of the assessment of this project will be, you know, for you and your staff and your director and the larger community that you're involving here. And I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you about in terms of that is, there's so much part of the framework and the structure of this project that is collaborative, that is inclusive of the community, is very sort of based in and of the community. So could you talk about sort of how you see that fitting into the whole mission of the museum?
Well, I'm hoping that it will expand the mission. I'm hoping that we are entering a time where all the things that we said we couldn't do, we now have to do them. So we're finding that we can, right? So we're finding that it's actually possible to create accessibility. It's possible to do more than develop audience, to actually include audience, to not only engage audience, but to be engaged, you know, and challenge the audience. So it's the light of the moment, you know, or maybe even the might of the moment, the power of the moment, that we have to work differently. So we do. And I think that's what's so different about this moment, is that before, I feel that there was this kind of like, you know, pushing and tugging, and not necessarily just at NMWA, National Museum of Women in the Arts, but just in the museum world period, that it's like, come on, we can do something different. We've got to think about this differently. Let's think, you know, let's do this. And everyone's like, well, that's too much. Well, I don't know. But now it's like, so much is unknown. So much is seemingly impossible, that when you have to make something possible, we're able to push the boundaries. So that's how I'm hoping it will touch the mission and expand it, and maybe even reevaluate and say, let's redetermine what we can do, because now we know that we can do more.
I think one of the ways you've done that, and what I've read and seen so far, is this unique, like looking at how you can ensure that as you say, that the exhibit reflects and serves the communities. And it seems like your partnership with the Curative Collective is one of the main ways of doing that. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so the Curative Collective is, we do interviews with people that work at the intersection of art, social justice, art, social justice, and food. And so as a museum, I understand some of the capacity that we have to do the work, but we also have a platform to highlight the work. So Curative Collective allows us to talk with people like the DC, the Mutual Aid Apothecary, Black Magic Sisters, Strobe Apothecary. We're going to talk with, you know, we have just different organizations that are helping during this time period around food. And for them to talk about the work that they're doing. They're also they're preparing recipes. They're showing our audience some of the tools that they use with their own audience to support their community. And so now it's creating like an interesting wrap around service, I guess, you know, where you have all these organizations that are in the food, justice, and art space that are now also resources of the exhibition, and totally, you know, shifting what is accessible when you go to an art exhibition. So instead of having a list of like, oh, these are just the resources, now we have interviews. They're part of the exhibition. They will be included in the final presentation of the exhibition. And that, to me, that makes a huge difference in our capacity, and also perhaps, you know, their capacity as well.
Well, my hope is, in terms, as you say, in terms of tapping into that capacity, it brings up the whole question in terms of the museum field, in terms of sustainability of these incredible exhibits and programs and partnerships that we create, and then how are they sustained? And I know that you chair the museum's committee for Women, Arts, and Social Change initiative there. And could you talk about how you see that perhaps expanding that impact and reach?
So one of the things, and hold on one second, George, if it goes off, then I'm just going to log back in. So just, you know, just come back on because my battery might go, but I'm going to ahead and answer the question. One of the things that I'm hoping is that with an exhibition where you're creating an archive of these recipes and these remedies, and you're collaborating with organizations that use recipes and remedies as a part of their work, I would hope that then this exhibition always becomes a resource, that it always can be used, that something that they can either contribute to or say, you know, you can look at this exhibition, here's the
Oops, we lost you.
Yeah, she'll come back. She said her phone might die. Yeah.
So you can just edit all this kind of stuff out.
Yeah, we're just gonna cut all this out.
I hope.
Yeah, we will. I'll email.
We're doing okay? Was there anything where we're not touching that you had hoped we touch?
No, I think we're getting great content. I think this is all really good. So that's sometimes why I'm like focusing on Melani, because I'm like, ooh, this is a sound bite that we can like plop out just by itself for social. So
yeah, well, knowing these kinds of things, you know, I'm a big one to think in terms of marketing opportunities, not for me, but for the museum.
Yeah, I think it'll be good to have, and I think we're gonna put it in the ritual section of the website, and so like whatever we put together. So I think that'll also be good, because I think we've really wanted people to think about how curation works for this exhibition, and how we really are focused on community, and that's kind of a ritualistic practice for us, like in the museum field. So I think it's going to be really
exactly right.
And I'm a transparent person. I'm always pushing for transparency. So I think this will be really great. People will have that openness.
Yeah, I did want to sort of cross over, you know, to talk about things that are not my business to talk about.
Totally fine. Yeah. I get it.
And if it is, you'll just edit it out. So
yeah, and you know, we'll probably keep the full thing for the archives. I mean, I'm probably gonna send this to the editor and be like, hey, since you're editing these chunks together, can you get rid of like the 5 minutes that George and I are just talking, because for the archive, we're just chatting. But once I don't know how to, once I like to stop and pause, it's just easier for our editor to pull it out.
Sure.
But yeah, and I'll live in the archive too, so that's always great. And we're going to try and link all the archived videos to the resources page through the library. So that's something I'm going to talk about next week with them. But yeah, we're really excited.
So are all 9 interviews finished with the artist?
We have one more, so we have 7 of them that are done that I'm reviewing today, just to make sure. But yeah, all right, I'm going to leave.
Okay.
Okay. Can you pick up where we're answering what I posed to you, or what?
Yeah, I can pick up where you did. I'm just going to start a little bit at the beginning of it, so we
Go
can
ahead.
It. Okay. So the importance of the curative collective. Sorry. The importance of the Curative Collective and having partners that can expand your capacity with an exhibition is that it really allows the museum to work differently with the community, and also for art to be sustainable and relevant. So a lot of times what happens, like you spoke about, is that there's an exhibition, it goes up, and then outside of the art academy or outside of like studying it, it doesn't always have relevance to the social community around it, unless it's anchored in a social issue. So by having the Curative Collective and these organizations that are working at the intersection of art and social justice and food, and us having things like a pantry, having different resources, a searchable tool, something that makes it easy for them to talk about food that they're introducing, and also creates dialogue around food, it creates an outcome or an exhibition that's actually relevant to the community that we serve, and then also it highlights how important and relevant these organizations are to our mission as well, because we understand the power of art, but we also know that the capacity of a museum may say, okay, well, this is how much we can do. But through partnerships, you can say, well, I can introduce the issue, I can provide platform for the issue, and here are people that are professionals at working at expanding how we're able to show up with this issue.
So before I go to the last question, I just want to make sure that you and Amanda are okay with me bringing up about the sustainability issue with that initiative at the museum, and if you answered that, okay.
Okay, so no, I need to do that.
Okay, well, so
I need to do that.
okay.
I want to just, yeah,
Because I think it's I think that's important. Amanda and I were sort of talking about that a little bit while you were on break there. I think that might be really an important point.
Okay.
To show in terms of showing the museum's commitment long term.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I have the wording for it. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, and that's why working inside the Women, Art, and Social Change initiative and having programs like the Fresh Talk and having things like our cultural capital events where we had partnerships, it provided like the perfect foundation to build on it and expand on how we're including the community and how we're making sure that we're a part of a community and serving them and doing more than and making sure that it's not just lip service, that it's not, okay, so we have a community partnership. We have a partnership and we're actively redefining what we do through those partnerships. So for example, one of our Curative Collective members had brought up, they said, well, the history of Black people with providing recipes is that these recipes have been turned into a commercial product. And so there's some, people are reluctant to put their family recipes. And so by having that information, that changed an element of the exhibition. And that made us say, okay, well, we can add food memories to it. But that's the same way that we're working when we're doing a Fresh Talk. We take the feedback from our audience and it changes the way that we do things. When our audience said, well, we want to participate more, we created a forum for them to participate more in it. And having that kind of relationship with the audience and programs like Women, Art, and Social Change, it definitely makes the museum sustainable. And it also opens it up to growth that can be long-term. And you can also grow with the community that's around you.
Well, I think that it's interesting in terms of our conversation that we keep touching on sort of the challenges that COVID has brought to, questioning, expanding whatever the roles of curators and artists, and most importantly, I think audiences also in museum settings. That your project really has that potential for us to look as a case study. And I guess my last thing I wanted to ask you is, especially in terms of looking forward to the light at the end, so to speak, in 2021 and the launching of your project, that what do you see this current moment hold for the future of museums?
I feel that we all are in a window of opportunity, that there have been discussions about art institutions and audiences dwindling. And right now we're at this moment where society is changing at a pace that everyone has to be actively a part of that change and actively a part of progressing society. And art has the power to do that. And art institutions have an opportunity to explore their power to support and progress humanity. And so I feel that, it's like anything. Once you have a drop of it, or once you have a small part of it included, it has to change everything. And right now, the museum is looking at future exhibition models and saying, well, what are the elements of this project that we can take into our next exhibitions, and how do we can keep growing these ideas? And so that's the might of the moment. We have to be willing to walk into the unknown. I think that we've kind of gotten some formulas about how things are done, and now we need different recipes. We need different remedies and rituals, even in our museum practices, and that's what we have the capacity to do. And this exhibition is an example of that, primarily because of its flexibility, because it's saying, you know what, we don't know all the answers, but what we do know is that we have the capacity to make something new, and we can make something new together. And who needs to be a part of that together? And let's try some things and push them forward with the same level of excellence and the same level of reverence that we've had for the work that we've done in the past.
Well, I just want to say advance congratulations to
Thank
you, the artist, and your staff for really, again, providing us for this well-deserved and long-anticipated renewal in all our lives.
Thank you so much, George. Thank you so much. I am glad that you could interview and ask the questions. You always ask wonderful questions. So I'm glad that this could be a part of the archives related to this exhibition.
And a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you.